Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to introduce Bill number RS 2683, which is an act concerning water relating to public health and environment, requiring the Secretary of Health and Environment to adopt rules and regulations by July 1st of 2028 to allow for direct and indirect potable reuse of treated wastewater. It's RS 2683. Any questions? We'll be hearing about it today, so thank you. Reuse, that is.
Are there any other bill requests? Seeing none, we'll move forward. First up on our agenda is to hear from Earl Lewis, Chief Engineer. Welcome, Earl.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's good to be back before this committee early in the session. I think we've got some slides to go through, and maybe you've got them in front of you. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an update of things that are going on in our world as far as the water side and some things we've been active with over the last year, and then obviously whatever topics you want to talk about and questions you might have, we'd certainly be willing to talk about those as well. So let's go to the next slide if we can. Oh, I can do it myself. Maybe I can. Right. Oh, there we go. Okay. So things we want to talk about, give you an update on. We've had a number of rules and regulations kind of going through the process here the last year. So we'll talk about some of those that maybe you've heard about, some key ones. We're going to give you a little bit of an update on just some things that maybe we don't talk about, kind of the run-of-the-mill things that happen every day and are somewhat tied to our budget as well. I'll give you a little update on Quivira as well as some of our interstate issues, and then kind of finish up with ongoing coordination with the GMDs and their work as you directed them to under 2279. So first one that we have kind of gotten clear through the process is an update to our impairment regulations. And so again, impairment regulations really when we have a senior water right that's being impaired, what do we do about it? And so in my opinion, what we tried to do with these regulations is clean them up, streamline them a little bit, make it a little bit easier for a senior right to protect their property right. I want to go clear into the details, but it had kind of grown a little bit over the years, and in my opinion, it made it harder for a senior right to protect their right. We put a lot of the onus on the senior right to prove that they were being impaired when I think the statute says that's the responsibility of the Chief Engineer and Division of Water Resources. So we tried to clean that up. One of the key points of contention was we really took the groundwater management districts out of that process. They had been built into the process through regulation. But again, if we go back and look at what the statute says, it's very clear that that responsibility lies with Division of Water Resources and Chief Engineer. Doesn't mean we won't go talk to the GMDs, but we wanted to kind of speed that along and not make that a requirement. So those went through the process, had a public hearing in October, and those became effective in mid-December. So those are in place. Another one that's going through the process at the same time regarding local enhanced management areas, or LEMAs, and fixed allocation. And this was partially in response to the bill that was passed, a year ago, 2 years ago, that allowed kind of that MIFA-like provision to be used in a LEMA so that somebody can overpump their water right in a single year as long as they don't go over a 5-year allocation. We're trying to bring those two things together. We had some, again, went through public hearing in October, had some comments from some of the stakeholders. We went back and looked at some of those comments, thought they had some validity to them, and made some changes to that. So one of the key questions or key points of difference here was our regulations as initially drafted said that you couldn't use individual water right, historic use, to set the allocations. And the primary purpose of that is, as time has gone on, we still hear it, we had some here just last month, people that were pumping because they said, we know that we're going to be in a LEMA, I need to keep my water use history up so I get a bigger allocation when the LEMA comes, right? So we want to discourage that activity. But But that's a complicated issue because then is there a legitimate reason they're pumping? And you get into a discussion or an argument about what that really means. And so we've made some changes, we think, try and move towards some of the concerns that the GMD's had in particular, but still try and make sure that we meet the other statutory requirement, which is we give due consideration for past conservation. Right? That's the other side of the balance. If somebody's across the road and has been using less water, we want to make sure that we don't penalize them by giving them lower allocation than somebody that maybe was more aggressive in their use. So we've just sent those back out to the GMD so they know what changes we made. They go back through Department of Administration and Attorney General's office, and we can hopefully adopt those here in the next few months. We just had, excuse me, JCAR hearings and a public hearing earlier this month on three regulations. One regarding water conservation areas as required by statute. Statute was passed in 2015, said we have to do regulations. We wanted to see how those worked before we adopt regulations, but we've sent those through the process. Flow meter regulations, we've had regulations defining what an appropriate flow meter is, how it's installed, those kind of things for a long time. But as time goes on, we get new technologies. We find our users, some of our users get very innovative in how they get around our rules. So we try and clean that up a little bit. And then the last one is how far can people move a water right? How far can they move a well if they've got an established water right? And how do we go about evaluating whether that move is impacting somebody else? And that's the change of point of diversion. So again, we just had our public hearing last week, got some comments on those. We're going to come back here in the next week or so, look at all those comments, see if we think we need to respond to those comments or make any changes, and then either move them forward with adoption or make changes and send them back through the process. MIFA regulations, again, appreciate the work that you all did, I think last year on changing the MIFA law to streamline it. Again, our regulations aren't necessarily in compliance with that now because they were lined up with the previous statute. So we've realigned those things, sent it out for comments. And just on all of these, our process is that we'll draft something up, put an explainer that says why we're doing that. We'll send that out to all of our key stakeholder groups and tell them, here's what we're doing. We want to get your comments on the front end and see if there's any huge red flags that we need to deal with before we ever send them through the process. So that's kind of where we're at with these. Is we've sent those out. We've got some comments back for stakeholders. We're getting ready to send those through Department of Administration, Attorney General, and then ultimately through JCAR and public hearing. So again, hopefully these will be in place before the end of the year as well. Again, I wanted to something we haven't necessarily done in the past. We talk about a lot of these different pieces, but we don't necessarily give you any numbers a lot of times, or give you little pieces of numbers. But one of the things we're trying to do at DWR is put in context all the other work we do. We come and talk to you about things that are issues that need to be dealt with, but we don't necessarily talk about the day-to-day activity, which is the bulk of our work. And again, just to give you some numbers, so actually the top line is 2024 total water use in the state of Kansas. About 3.85 million acre feet were used in 2024 in the state of Kansas. That's pretty typical, 3.8 million acre feet. We've got just under 35,000 permanent water rights active in the state of Kansas as of the end of the year. Every single one of those gets a water use report. We're right in water use report season. So if you haven't turned in your water use report, get it done before March 1st. We don't want to fine you. If we add terms and temporaries, we get about another 1,800 that are active. Every year we have people come in that want to change primarily their well location. They might have an issue with their well. That's our biggest one, where people have to re-drill wells, that kind of thing, but can change their place of use, type of use. Last year we approved 618 changes to water rights, so pretty big number. And as a water right is being developed, one of the requirements for statute is that our staff go out and do a field inspection, make sure everything's the way that the permit was said it was going to be, check their water use, make sure they're operating in compliance. So we did 157 of those last year. We also go out and just make sure. Yeah.
When you're talking about water rights being proven up,
Yeah.
That's after a change has been made because most of the state, or a lot of the state is already somewhat closed.
So most of this is in the central eastern portion of the state. So we still have new water rights being developed in parts of the state. The majority, as you correctly point out, the majority of the state is already fully developed and is closed to new appropriations, but we still have areas that are not. And so this really represents those areas that are not. So, and again, so just the overall process, so somebody comes in, says, I want to develop a new water right. They file an application for a new permit. We look at that and make sure that we don't think that's going to impair somebody else. If we approve it, then they go out and start drilling their well, putting their pump site up, put their system up, whatever it is. They use that for a few years. They say, all right, I've done what I need to do. Our field and staff goes out, talks to the owner, looks at their system, does this field inspection, and documents what they have done and if it's done correctly. And if so, then we issue what's called a certificate, which is, down there, the next bottom. Last year, 78, went out the door, and that really defines their water right, their property right. They go file that with the Register of Deeds. That is the extent of their property right. So water right is developed through their use, but the field inspection report is really documenting what they've done, what's the extent of the water right that they have developed, and the certificate is the documentation of that. In addition to that, kind of ongoing, we go out and do meter checks and other compliance checks. Did a little over 7,500 of those last year. And then again, 78 certificates issued, and there's a little over about 563 that are kind of in the queue that need to be done. So we've got a little bit of a backlog. We've talked a lot over the last few years about our new application backlog. And we've redirected some staff to try and deal with that. You provided some additional resources, which we appreciate. Thank you for the additional resources. But there's kind of a cost to that as well, right? If we redirect staff off of certificates onto new apps, we kind of end up with a backlog growing on our certificates as well. So this graphic shows from January of 21 until about the end of last year, kind of the total number of applications we have pending, whether that's term permits, whether that's changes, MIFAs, and new appropriations. So new apps is kind of that permanent. I just talked about that process of developing a water right. That's really the blue line. The orange is the MIFAs. And so, again, you saw the effect of the drought in 22. That's why we came to you with the change, requesting the change in our process of MIFAs to try and you can see how that affected our overall totals for a few years, our backlog for a few years. That's why we really wanted to come and have that. And again, we appreciate the change you made last year to hopefully speed that along as well. But you can see that the good news is both our new application backlog and our total backlog are at their lowest point they've been in 3 or 4 years and trending the right direction. So again, kind of a combination of policy changes, additional resources, and you played a role in both of those things. So thank you. On the dam safety side, again, we talk about dam safety some, and I think we mentioned before that at times we even have trouble having enough staff to, when somebody actually does do their inspection, they send it in, getting that inspection report done. Last year we had 88 inspection reports submitted, so it's probably about half of what should have been submitted, frankly, because typically we should have about 150 to 170 dams that should have inspections. So we still have a number that didn't get done. And again, right now our process is that's on the dam owner to do that and send us the inspection report. Now we've got to follow up and figure out why they didn't send that in and what we do about that. We did get some additional federal resources and focused on getting our backlog of the ones we had in hand done. And so we were able to get 130 of those reports approved. And then now we move on to, is there any issue with it and do we need to work with the dam owner to get that in good shape? So we did catch up on our dam inspection report, but we still have issues there. Maybe. I don't know who's got it. That's the last slide? Oh, okay. Not sure what happened there. The There are some other slides that we had. I wanted to give you a couple of, and I'll just do verbally and make sure you have those, the complete set here as well. Give you a little update on Quivira and Rattlesnake Creek. Obviously, that's been a hot topic here for the last few years. Continues to be. I think we've made a lot of progress over the last few years in bringing both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the GMD, and then the ag groups in particular together. And just to give you some examples here, in recent years, GMD5 has purchased 7 water rights. There's been another that have been retired, about 5 that have been retired through Division of Conservation programs. We've started administering minimum desirable stream flow for some of the groundwater users, another 10 or 12 water rights that are administered because the water stream flow is so low. That's happened in recent years. The local water bank has worked with us, as well as Kansas Corn Association, to lease water rights for up to a 5-year period, so the producer gets a payment in lieu of using their water right. And so we leased 25 water rights, and again, you might remember a couple of years ago there was a funding request for about $7 million one time to be set aside to be used for this purpose. And so there were 25 water rights right in Representative Fairchild's area where he lives and farms that agreed to take part in that program and are idling those water rights. So if you total those up, there's about 4,000 acre feet of authorized quantity, probably 1,800 or so acre feet of impact to stream flow. So didn't solve the whole problem, but it certainly is a big step in the right direction. The other thing is we've had another group, Kansas Water Use Association, local water user group, that has worked with us to do a pilot augmentation. So the local groundwater management district is working through a process, environmental impact statement process with NRCS, to develop a larger, long-term augmentation program. We have worked with some of the local farmers to use existing wells, again, idle, maybe not irrigate with it, but then take that and pump that water into the stream, right upstream from the gauge. And I think that's been very successful. It's been very well received. People can understand it. It's always good when people can see something on the project, see actual water going into the stream. U.S. Fish and Wildlife is happy with that as well. I think, frankly, they were didn't quite understand how that would work. And we're a little concerned about that going in. Got a lot of work to do, but certainly I think that's a step in the right direction. So we'll see. I think the GMD5 should get an answer from NRCS on approval or need for changes on their environmental impact statement anytime now, which really what that means is that starts to loosen the federal purse strings and they can access some federal dollars to do some of these things, same things we're talking about here, kind of scale a lot of these up. And so again, I think we've got a lot of work to do, but I think it's been a really good work group and a really good process. I wanted to touch on a couple of things. Again, just to make sure you're aware, we've worked quite a bit on interstate issues here the last year on the upper Arkansas. Currently, we've had a compact with Colorado since 1949. One of the key components says that they cannot materially deplete the usable state line flows that are available to us. And so that's kind of a nice wonky statement, but how do you actually implement it? We've got to watch what's going on in Colorado and figure out if the water supply, if we're getting our fair share. And so we've identified a number of things that we continue to work on with them or raise questions. We spent a lot of time on some of their, what they call recharge ponds, tied with a lot of their irrigation ditches. Worked through a lot of that this year. We still got some more work to do, but we raised some serious questions. We think, again, the way that they were approaching things or calculating things was leaving us probably a little bit short. On the Republican River, dry year in northwest Kansas, dry year in southwest Nebraska. That's right in the heart of the Republican Basin. Nebraska is short about 32,000 acre feet of water that they're supposed to provide to us. Now they've already provided some of that water, and they will provide the rest of it. Again, we're watching that. We're going to make sure that they do that, and we have mechanisms to do that. Primarily, that goes into Harlan County and supplies Kansas Bostwick Irrigation District in north central Kansas. But again, we're going to expect to be working with Nebraska to make sure that we get the water that we're entitled to is there as well. Final thing I wanted to mention again is just a real short update on the GMD coordination related to 2279. And so as you might remember, that was passed in 23. Yep. Let's get that 23, 24. There's too many numbers involved here. They're required that they identify high priority areas by July 1 of 2024. And then the key here is that they develop action plans to address those high priority areas of concern and submit those by July 1 of 2026. So, we're 5.5 months away from the deadline now. Was in Leota, Kansas this week. On Tuesday, we're having a hearing on the renewal for the Wichita County Lima. So continued progress there. Obviously, we've still got the rest of GMD1 in West Central Kansas. We've been talking with GMD4 and their board, and Shannon Kenyon, their director. They're moving towards submittal of renewals with maybe some changes, maybe some additions to their Limas, both Limas, in Northwest Kansas, hopefully later this year as well. So again, I think they're taking another step in the right direction, and so we appreciate that. Yesterday, I spent about 3 hours with the GMD3 board, Southwest Kansas, and I'd say they're making a lot of progress. They're kind of, they all get to this point. Everything is great until you actually get to the point of making a decision, and these are hard decisions, right? Affect a lot of people and a lot of opinions about what should be done. You got to sort through all that. So I give them credit for working through that. But they're in the tough part of the decision-making process. But we've been trying to work with them and trying to figure out, talked about these Lima regs up front and how to make sure that what they're proposing will fit with the statutes and fit within our regulations and how much we can give as far as flexibility. I'd say, and again, those who've been around for a while will understand this. Those that are new to this probably won't. All 4 of the Limas we have to date have all been on 5-year terms. So they're for a 5-year allocation, and they'll go through a process just like we're doing with Wichita County hearing on Tuesday, where we essentially renew or create a new Lima that replaces the old one, right? So they're indexed. We've talked with GMD3 about, and one other thing before I get to that. So the statute 2279, which is now KSA 82A 1044, says that they'll submit their action plans by July 1, and then says the chief engineer, has 90 days to determine whether or not their action plans reasonably address the issues that they've identified. And so again, that leaves a lot open for interpretation, and so we've tried to work with all the GMDs to say, okay, when you do that, what does that mean? How am I going to evaluate that? Because I think they don't want, and we don't want for them to send us something and we say not good enough, we're taking over, right? Because that's kind of the way the statute works. We want them to be successful. We want to implement what they want to implement, but we also want to make sure that it reasonably addresses the issues. And so earlier last year, we had some discussions with them and started had that discussion with them and say, what do we think that means? And then followed that up with a letter to them in November, which I'm happy to share with the committee, that lays out what I think that means, right? So if you send something, if you're in a groundwater decline area, the keys here really are that I've said, I think that we can get to a stable water level anywhere in the state in the next 20 years. And so, again, that's not, there's a lot of people that say we should get there next year. There's a lot of people that say we should just mine it all and use it up. I think that's kind of a good neutral kind of middle ground, right? So we're going to make progress, but the producers are going to know, here's our timeline. And we want them to look and say how much water is left and what kind of economy we're going to have left once we get there. We've also said if you're 10 or 15% away, you got to just get there now, right? Because I think the experiences we've seen in other areas, folks adjust pretty well if they've got some flexibility and they've got some they know what the rules are. So we've provided that to them. So going back to GMD3 and their approach, again, I think one of the key things that they're talking about, which we support very well, is talking about not just having a 5-year Lima, but having a 20-year Lima that has 5-year increments. So folks know, here's my allocation for the first 5 years. I know it's going to be a bigger step for 5 through 10 and 10 through 15, ultimately getting to a stable water level. Again, giving them a ramp so folks can adjust over time, but setting that in place the whole time. Because again, these things are hard. They're hard for a local board, they're hard for us, and even on a renewal, right? Because the first thing we hear is, we're gonna do more next time. You get to the renewal and they get a whole bunch of people say, everything's working fine, don't change anything, right? And so there's a lot of times we kind of stall after that first period, kind of pick it up maybe after a couple periods. We want to kind of get that whole ramp in place on the front end if we can. So I think I've covered all the things I wanted to talk about. And apologize, we'll make sure you have the full slide deck, and we'll also make sure you have the letter we sent in November giving guidance on 1044. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you got any.
I'll start off real quick. When you referred to JCAR, Joint Committee on Agency Rules and Regulations.
Thank you.
Is anybody in this room on that committee? They met a couple weeks ago. They went over some of the rules and regulation changes that the division was wanting to do. We're trying to get rid of a lot of these old use it or lose it type attitudes. And that's the reason for those changes. I'm still lobbying. I think there should be somebody from water on that committee to give some, but that's how it is. Same thing with appropriations. Is anybody in this committee on appropriations that's meeting at the same time next door? No. So that's a challenge for this group. And not everybody in this building understands water issues like you people do right here.
Correct.
Any questions here? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may have been something that we've gone over before, but as far as the new appropriations, and you mentioned that some areas are eligible for that and others aren't, what areas in the state are eligible and which aren't, and what criteria is used to determine that?
Yeah, you bet. So really any of the western groundwater management districts are closed. GMD 5, as you know, is closed to new appropriation. There are areas within GMD 2, so kind of that north of Wichita, Halstead, Newton, Hutch area. There are still spots you can find a spot for a well in that area. A lot of our development is more surface water dominated and more in the eastern third of the state, and particularly in the northeast portion of the state. We've got this again where there's a lot of overlap between our role on the dam safety side and on our appropriation side. We've got a number of probably 30 to 50 of those new applications every year are related to somebody that wants to put up a dam and capture some water and then use that for irrigation. And so that's where a lot of our development is happening, but it's really in the eastern portion where, if we've got kind of a progressive map that shows, and you can almost kind of see the development march across the state from west to east.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Earl. Good to see you. Good morning. Questions about Quivira and then the GMDs. For Quivira, 2 questions. So based on the pilot project you've been doing with the augmentation, does that seem like it will be a successful model for the area? Are there ongoing conversations about, supplemental conservation, ALIMA, WCA, something like that? Or is the push really just to get the EIS approval and to start there? And based on what you're seeing with the pilot, do you think that could be effective?
So I would say what we're seeing with the pilot is a good model, and we do think it can be effective for a couple reasons. One, first and foremost, the needs of the refuge are not even throughout the year, right? They're a migratory refuge primarily, not wholly, but their big demand for when they have a lot of birds and when they need water is really in the spring migration and the fall migration. So they don't need as much in the middle of the winter or the middle of the summer. And so, a natural stream doesn't really care about that. And so with the augmentation, it gives us the opportunity to turn on that switch and provide water when it's most beneficial to the refuge. And the balance of that is then we probably don't need to make as many other reductions in other parts in order to make sure that the refuge has the water they need. There are still ongoing conversations. I wouldn't say at this point about necessarily Lima-wide. We did approve a water conservation area with some of the ag groups to work on some of that. Again, I think the bank and lease program has been successful. And I think that has probably changed folks' minds a little bit as well. And then, as we talked about, GMD5 and their process with a permanent augmentation plan. The other thing that we are, that would rely on an area that hasn't been developed primarily because of water quality issues, which is okay in this situation. But there's other issues that they're going to run into, and they're starting to run into with, that's all privately owned, and you've got to get access, and all those logistical issues, legal issues you got to deal with. I think the pilot aug is also showing that using existing wells that we know are in good, the water quality is good, and people understand how that works, and using that is going to be a piece of that as well. In fact, we have contracted with the county, Stafford County, have them use their engineering consultants to look at how do we tie in more of those existing wells into this and turn it from more of a pilot to make that some part of the overall permanent program as well.
I've always been really impressed by how, especially in recent years, I think all the stakeholders have really come together to address this issue, and appreciate the leadership that you guys have taken in helping make that happen. And excited that hopefully we get an answer on the EIS soon. And then the only other thing on Quivira, I knew in last year's budget they put an audit of the water bank, I think as maybe a proviso. Do you know the status of that by chance?
I do know the status of that. We put that out for RFP, did not get any takers the first time, so we modified it, made some additional contacts, put it out again, did get a contract underway. That delayed us, frankly, from getting it in time. The audit is underway. They're looking at it right now. I think their projected time to have that done is in May. So unfortunately, probably we'll be back at next legislative session with the results of that audit. Our hope and goal here was to have it for you right now, but a number of delays pushed us back.
Okay, thank you. And then just one question on GMD. So I really like this concept of the 20-year plan, this idea that we're doing longer-term strategic planning for the resource. I'm just curious, with the Lima law, so the 20-year plan, that'd be part of their management plan, but then they'd still have to do the Limas on a 5-year cycle. Is that?
No, there's really not a time frame specified in the Lima law. And so we can have any length of time that the GMD wants to put forward and we can agree to. It's just kind of been by practice that people are comfortable with a 5-year time frame. Mm-hmm. But there's not necessarily anything that in the law or in our rules that says it has to be 5 years.
If I may, a quick follow-up to that. So if they agree to a 20-year plan, if they're not saving as much as they think they should be, or if there are other situations that come up, are they able to revisit the plan? What's that process? Yeah,
they are, and again, I appreciate you saying that, because that's a key component of what we've talked to them about is having this kind of 20-year approach, 5-year allocations, but at each of those 5-year periods, we have a review of our progress, right? Was the science as accurate as what's on the ground? Are we making as much progress? Are we ahead, behind? And are there any changes that we want to make? So, logistically, if there's significant changes, we probably have to go back and have a hearing and make a modification to that Lima. If they're minor, maybe not. We don't know what that line is, but building in a review every 5 years or so and checking our progress and seeing if we need to make changes one way or another.
That seems like a great model for, I think, the future for these plans. So I'm interested to see how that goes. Thank you.
I've noticed some pretty good success with the MIFAs, and like this last year, we allow multi-year flex within WCAs.
Correct.
Can you describe to us how successful that has been, and why GMDs now are kind of wrestling with a question of if you've completed your 5-year MIFA or even within a Lima or something, and you conserved far more water than you initially anticipated. Can you carry over some of that into the next time period?
So I'll be a little bit careful because that's, one of the key questions under the Wichita County LEMA that we just had a hearing on, and the record is still open. So if you want to provide comments on that, we'd welcome those. In general terms, anytime, what we've seen overall is anytime you have a 5-year allocation, especially if you allow somebody to pump more than their authorized quantity in a really dry year, what we've seen almost across the board is people end up saving water. They use less water in their allocation. And again, primarily, if they get an average year or a wet year, it changes their behavior. Where maybe historically they were like, I've got a certain amount I'm authorized for this year, and I want to make sure that I'm going to get as much economic benefit as I can out of that. But now if I know I may need that in year 4 or 5, if it's really dry, maybe I can take a little bit more risk and not irrigate as much this year and bank that water for a future year. And then, of course, the benefit is we get a normal or wet year in years 4 and 5, then they don't use as much water, and we end up having that be not only a flexibility tool, but a conservation tool. So the Wichita County LEMA, again, you all passed the legislation that allowed that kind of flexibility to overpump a single year as long as you're within an allocation. As part of the MIFA, that was not an authorized option here until recently. Wichita County LEMA is the first one to incorporate that. But one of the struggles that they've had and the public has had is how do I do that? And then also, as you said, if I didn't use as much as my allocation was in the first period, do I get to save that and carry it forward and use that added onto my allocation in the second period? So Sheridan 6, LEMA, they struggled with that the first time. And so, they had an 11-inch allocation. They do things a little bit differently. Each one is a little different. So they had an 11-inch allocation, and they said you can carry forward up to an additional inch that you saved. But so if you saved 3 inches of water, you only carry forward 1, but you can carry forward up to an additional inch and get a little bit more allocation, a little more insurance in that next period. So that's always kind of the balance is how much do you allow somebody to carry forward without creating a very large allocation in a subsequent period. And that's really where the discussion, the balance is. We want to keep that encouragement for folks to continue to save water and leave it in the ground, but we don't want to continue to bank water to such an extent that we create a problem later on in an impairment situation. That's always the balance folks are talking about.
Any further questions? Seeing none.
Thank you
very much, Earl. And now we'll move forward to Gary Jansen, the Director of Public Works at the City of Wichita and a member of our Water Task Force.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm really pleased to be here this morning. Appreciate your time. I am the Director of Public Works and Utilities for the City of Wichita, and I'm here today in that capacity. I want to mention something that the Chair just said. I'm also privileged to sit as a member of the Kansas Water Authority, also on the Water Task Force, and I'm on the board for GMD2. And the only reason I tell you that is because I've had the opportunity over the last few years to see what's happening with water discussions and issues across the entire state. And what I want to talk to you about today, and the bill that Representative Pickert has been so gracious to introduce for us, as far as water reuse, this isn't going to be the best fit necessarily for everyone. I want to talk to you about why we've come to this point in Wichita and we're looking at water reuse. But I do believe this is a valuable tool for everyone to have, potentially to be able to use in the future. Looking at the challenges that we're all facing with water, some of the things that Earl talked about as far as water rights being closed, there's not a lot of water availability in areas, including in ours. So with that, I'm going to move forward. I want to talk to you about where we've been in Wichita, where we're going, and why water reuse. Is this PowerPoint? Thank you. Try one more time. Got it, thank you. So the City of Wichita is a regional water provider to over 500,000 people. We provide water to 17% of the state's population, or 1 in every 6 Kansans. That includes 11 wholesale customers, which is 8 neighboring cities and 3 rural water districts. and McConnell Air Force Base, which is very critical, and I want to always make sure I don't leave that one out. I will tell you that the city of Derby is working towards building a water treatment plant. They have some untapped groundwater rights that they're going to utilize. They still will need Wichita as a partial water source. City of Valley Center is doing the same. That does help long term. We have looked at that with our projections and our water use and what we need in the future, but as we continue to grow, at some point in time, that will be offset. So I want to talk about our water sources, the challenges we've had, where we've been over the last few years as we navigated through really what was a historic drought for our region and impacted our ability to do a lot of things over a period of time. And I'm going to start with our groundwater source, top center, EcoSpeds. We have capped water rights within the EcoSpeds. If any of you have heard us talk about our aquifer storage and recovery project, we have made significant investments over the years to capture high water in the Little Ark River. We treat it, we put it back into the EcoSpeds. We're able to keep at higher levels. That does multiple things too. It helps with water quality, chloride plume issues within the Burton area. The higher we keep the aquifer, we're able to slow that intrusion into our well field. Earl talked about closed water rights for both of our water sources. There's not any more water availability for us. Cheney Reservoir was built in the early 1960s for the sole purpose of providing water to the Wichita region. We do have all the water rights within Cheney Reservoir. That is where our biggest challenge has been. I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more and really what moved us towards looking at the potential of water reuse. Cheney Reservoir reached a record low in November of 2024. Since the point in time it was built, it was over 8.5 feet low as a result of lack of precipitation in the basin and the watershed that feeds 600,000 acre watershed that feeds Cheney Reservoir, North Fork of the Nenasko River. Dry conditions for a very long period of time had significant impacts on that. We went into what we called stage 2 of our drought response plan. We restricted watering to 1 day a week for almost a year and a half. We were very close to moving into stage 3, which would have eliminated all outdoor watering. And you can imagine the impact that would have in a city in a region the size of Wichita if we'd eliminated outdoor watering. We were going to start impacting jobs at that point and businesses, which we were very close to doing already. Through the course of time, we had a lot of public engagement. I heard from a lot of folks with a lot of great ideas on how we might go about this in the future. We looked at, the question was asked, why don't you dredge Cheney Reservoir? We have made very strategic and significant investments in watershed protection measures upstream of Cheney. The last study that was done showed that we've only lost 7 to 10% of the capacity within the reservoir, which is good. Dredging is a lose-lose proposition. It's expensive, and we just weren't going to gain that much capacity. We had questions asked about why don't you build another reservoir? I could go into all the reasons for a long time why that's just not feasible, and it's not just economically, but there's so many reasons why that can't be done. Therefore, still our challenge is what do we do to look for a new water supply? Cheney Reservoir, we were fortunate that we saw record rains in June. Two major events brought the reservoir actually above and into the pool flood stage where it still is now. We cannot count on that in the future. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I wanted to explain to you what this is because this is really the root of our problem, looking to the future and trying to create a sustainable water supply, a locally controlled water supply for our region. This is Cheney Reservoir surface level. On the left starts in 2009. As you head towards the right, the lowest point you see there initially was the last drought we worked through, the 2011 to 2013 range. We came out of that. We were steady for some time, and then you can see about 2021, we started to see the impacts of the lack of precipitation. That lowest point in November, again, was an all-time low for Cheney Reservoir. We were fortunate to get the big rains. That is not predictable. That is not sustainable for the future. This is our real challenge, and is so much out of our control is the reason why we need to look for another water supply for our future. So what have we done then to continue to help ourselves, knowing that water reuse is something that's going to take some time to get to, and in the absence of doing anything else? I talked about our water restrictions. Since that time, in September of last year, our Wichita City Council put into place permanent water restrictions now in the Wichita region, and this impacts all of our customers. Anybody who receives water from Wichita, we are on a 3-day-week watering schedule. We expect to see maybe a 10% reduction in consumption. I'm anxious to see what happens as spring comes around. We're already starting to talk to our customers and the public as a reminder about this, to make sure that everybody's doing. We saw people get on board. I think they're going to be really good about that. They know what our challenges are. We have a rebate program in place that incentivizes water-saving devices inside and outside the house. Has been very successful. We have an internal conservation plan. The City of Wichita is a large organization. We have a lot of facilities. We have a lot of equipment. The public said, we will conserve water as soon as you do. So we did a lot of things to lead the way. And we've done a lot to save water internally. We have a new water treatment plant that we're working through some issues on right now. But once we bring that plant online, it has more flexibility than we currently do as far as treating our water sources. Our current water treatment plant is limited on the amount of groundwater that it can treat. When our new facility is online, it can treat 100% groundwater, 100% surface water. It allows a flexibility that we don't have now if we have challenges, especially to our surface water supply. We know none of this is enough to provide, again, a sustainable, locally controlled water supply for the future. So to look to diversify our water portfolio, we started thinking about the idea of water reuse and where we wanted to go with that. We need to be able to support growth and remain a critical component of the state's economic development engine. We've had businesses that have come to us through the Greater Wichita Partnership, others looking for data centers aside, other businesses that have come to us that are fairly large water users, would be a big impact for our community, for job creation and development, and we look to the future, and we were not necessarily going to be able to provide the water that they needed. We want to be able to do that. So in 2015, we started venturing into this whole idea of some type of reuse, especially on the industrial side. What this shows, the aerial on the left, is our main wastewater treatment plant at the south end of Wichita. It shows a pipeline to Spirit Aerosystems. We provide currently almost 1 million gallons a day of treated wastewater for industrial purposes for Spirit. Our contract would allow up to 2 million gallons a day. We've been working closely with them to see if they're able to take on more. We are continuing to look at industrial reuse opportunities across the community. We have started in early 2025, we started developing a water reuse master plan. We hired CDM Smith to do that. They've got a lot of experience across the country. We've looked to see what other states are doing relative to water reuse. There are multiple components of that plan. I want to talk about a few of them relative to what we're talking about today with this proposed legislation. The plan is primarily set to identify challenges to water supply reliability. We've had considerable public outreach, and we will continue to do that because this is a new concept. People have heard about this from other states. We want them to understand and be comfortable with our approach. We've looked at funding options. Full implementation of this is expensive, but we're looking at steps along the way, phased project approach. We've submitted a feasibility study to the Bureau of Reclamation so that we can be in line for potential federal funds in the future. But the two things I want to talk about are the regulations that are needed. None of this can happen without regulations, which are not currently in place in Kansas, and then a pilot plan that I want to hit on here at the end of this presentation. So I want to walk you through what this is, and then I've got a second part of this I want to talk about. This is a little bit hard to see, but this is something I've been showing to the public for over a year now, and it seems to be pretty impactful to talk about this whole concept of reuse. The left side, what that shows is our two water sources at the top and how the Wichita water cycle works. We treat anywhere from 17 to 19 billion gallons a year. We distribute it to the system, to residential neighborhoods for commercial and industrial use. That gets treated. What comes out of that is treated and goes into our rivers and streams, which is at the bottom of that left display. On the right gives you a close-up of what that looks like. Out of our main wastewater treatment plant, that is 25 to 30 million gallons per day of treated wastewater that's headed down the Ark River downstream for others to use. One component of this reuse process, we've been working closely with DWR, Earl and Lane. We've still got work to do. We have to make sure that we don't impact downstream users. If we were to look at capturing this effluent, treating it through advanced water purification, which I'll talk about more in just a moment, and creating a new water supply for ourselves. So far, it looks favorable. I'm not speaking for DWR by any means, because we still have work to do there. We cannot have an adverse impact downstream. It looks like so far we're in a pretty good place, but you can imagine our average daily demand is 50 million gallons a day over the course of a year. If we could find a way well into the future to create a new water supply that's 25 million gallons a day, that's half of our demand, that's half of our needs, where we could create a new water supply. That's what's exciting for us in moving forward. I've shown this display, this in public a lot, and this seems to resonate the most with people about this whole notion of reuse already in effect, especially on the indirect side. So very simply what this is, we've all been a part of indirect reuse for a long time. What I talked about, what we treat that goes into the Ark River, it goes downstream, others use that. I saw a presentation from Rob Gavin with KDHE where he kind of showed this same notion with all the rivers and streams in Kansas. Tom Stiles, retired from KDHE, used to always say everybody's downstream from somebody, right? This shows that same thing. If you've ever been to New Orleans and drank the water in New Orleans, it's been treated 12 or 13 times by the time it gets there. That water starts in the upper Mississippi River, somewhere probably around St. Paul, Minneapolis, finds its way down to New Orleans. It's been treated multiple times, indirect reuse already in place. This is an advancement of that 2 slides ago that I showed you about the Wichita water cycle, and this is included in this handout that you all have. You can take the opportunity to look at it a little bit closer, but I want to walk you through this real quick because this really does a good job of explaining what this whole notion of reuse is about. If you start on the right side, or the body of water shown, that's our combined water sources, Cheney Reservoir and Equus beds. The dark blue arrows follow our current water cycle through the water treatment process, distribution to homes and businesses, through the wastewater treatment plant, and currently now it either goes to non-potable use, like we talked about for Spirit, we do some for irrigation, or it goes back into the river. In the future, if we can make this work, assuming we can get regulations approved at the state level, and we can figure out ways to fund this, that light blue then becomes an option for us, where we go from our wastewater treatment plant to advanced water treatment facility. Indirect is either back to Cheney Reservoir or to the Equus beds. That's going to be a challenge for us. There's not a lot of capacity within the Equus beds for us to send indirect reuse back there. It is a long stretch to get out to Cheney Reservoir. It's 37 miles from our main wastewater treatment plant to Cheney Reservoir. And if you look at augmentation of Cheney Reservoir with treated reuse, you really only get value when the reservoir is down, right? So that's what starts pointing us more towards direct potable reuse. That's one option, or the inner circle is likely the most viable option for the Wichita region in the future is advanced water treatment. It's blended at our water treatment plant. It becomes direct potable reuse to our community. And that's a lot of information. It's included on the handout that you have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. Also included on the handout, a couple more slides. Appreciate your time. I'll hurry up and finish up here. I mentioned that Kansas has not developed regulations for potable reuse, which are necessary for implementation. We can't do a lot more here without regulations being in place. Again, appreciate the support of Representative Pickert, and I want to show you a couple of highlights of the proposed legislation, and then I want to talk about our pilot project, and I'll be done. This is just a delineated version of the proposed bill. This is an amending several current statutes. What it does is define direct potable reuse and indirect potable reuse, which is important to make sure that those are in there for public water supply purposes. And then the second part of that is something that she had already mentioned, talking about on or before July 1st of 2028, Secretary of Health and Environment shall adopt rules and regulations allowing for the direct and indirect potable reuse of treated wastewater. I want to just be very clear about something too. This would be a voluntary program. This would not be mandating or dictating anybody do this. It would allow, again, that tool that we think is very important to have in the toolbox for those who may be able to utilize this in the future. Last thing I want to talk about, which is, I think, is as critical as anything that we're going to do. We are moving forward with funding a pilot project that would look similar to what you see here. This was the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power's direct potable reuse project. The city of Wichita would plan to fund this, relying on Colorado regulations for now. We have a draft plan that KDHE is reviewing, but one of the real values of a pilot project, there's multiple facets of this, is a proof of concept for regulatory compliance, long-term sampling for validation of the treatment performance that this can work. Public outreach becomes very significant with this pilot project. I was in California last year looking at some of these facilities. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of public outreach. Schools were there, community groups to see how this can work and why it makes sense. Tours of the facility can be great tools to educate the public about these technologies that make reuse possible. I think it's going to be great for regulators to see this, for legislators to see this, anybody that wants to understand how this might work. And lastly, this is a different operational process. It'll be critical for us to make sure our staff is properly trained and understand how the technology works. Thank you for bearing with me. I know there's a lot of information, but that's all I've got, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Representative Droege.
Thank you for presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was curious about PFAs, if you've looked at those in this water treatment cycle because of the future problems we're going to deal with those.
Yes, sir. We have, and so we're fortunate in Wichita right now that we are not seeing it in our water sources, but we are very cognizant of the future and what that might look like. Our new water treatment plant is not currently set up to deal with certain emerging contaminants, but it can be converted to do the same. Through this process, this advanced water treatment process, we would be looking to accommodate treatment of emerging contaminants like PFAS. Yes, sir.
Gary, you might describe for the committee's use here, like your augmentation process north in the Equus beds. You can take flood levels from the Little Ark as long as they don't have too high of, what is it?
Atrazine is one of the main components we deal with. So every year when we bring ASR online, so our aquifer storage and recovery, and thank you for letting me have the chance to talk about this again because I probably kind of rushed through it. So we have a surface water treatment plant north of our community where our Equus Beds well field is. We capture high water in the Ark River through an intake structure. We treat it and we inject it back into the aquifer. But to the Chairman's point, when we've got the system winterized now, when we come back online sometime this spring, we usually have to get an initial flush or two through because of higher atrazine in the upper reaches of the Little Ark River. We do have programs in place working with farmers, producers, other ag users upstream to help reduce that and nitrates as much as possible. So we're ahead of that game, but it's something we have to watch. But it usually works pretty well. Once the river gets moving with spring rains, it doesn't take long, and we're able to start capturing those higher flows and putting that water back into the aquifer, trying to keep it as high as we can.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Gary. I'm really excited for this project and for other water reuse projects across the state. So excited to see the legislation and see how we can support you guys. My question, something I haven't wrapped my mind around, is how does this impact like downstream flows? So if the water keeps going back into the reuse cycle, does it impact how much water is being sent downstream? And I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to think through, like, would that create any interstate issues? I don't have any background info on that.
It's possible, and I mentioned, and I didn't go into a lot of detail, but because the experts are sitting behind me, if you want to ask any more detailed questions. But we have started evaluating the impact of downstream flows. Great question. There's this whole notion of perfected water rights and what water we can keep. But as much as anything, we have modeled during drought conditions in particular, if we were to capture a certain amount of the effluent that we looked at that's going into the river for future water use, what impact does that have? So far, the numbers that we've seen appear to be minimal impact at the places downstream of Wichita that could be potentially utilizing this flow that they now see. So that is a very critical component of this. I don't want to leave that behind. We have not finished that discussion with DWR, but we are continuing those conversations. We've got to make sure that that is in place because that is an issue in other states we've heard too. Have to make sure we don't impact downstream, even talking about the compacts and everything else that's in place, what's happening across the border. Right now, it looks like we're going to be in a good place, at least for some portion of this to be able to be utilized for reuse. But we'll continue that conversation for sure.
Representative Pickard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Gary. It was real informational. So one question I have is the public outreach. Do you have a plan to start that? And I mean, it's going to take a lot because there will be opponents till they understand what's going on.
So we do. So informally, since we started having this discussion over the last year, I bet I've made 40 public presentations across the community. Anybody who's willing to listen, and word kind of spread, people ask. We've been through our district advisory boards, through so many public meetings, all of the rotaries. It's been a great opportunity because there's been really good questions. I went and spoke to the governing bodies of probably half of our wholesale customers because they wanted to hear about this too. We're formalizing that outreach plan now. We're going to have a dedicated portion on our website. We've got some information there already for all the resources that the public needs. One of the things I'm excited about, if anybody's familiar with Exploration Place in Wichita, Sedgwick County has a science and exploration center. They see about 400,000 visitors a year. They're making Exploration Place is making a $30 million investment now. They're expecting to see that increase by 50%. They've agreed to create an exhibit for water reuse that we hope to see in place soon. 600,000 visitors a year, that's a big deal, but they're excited about helping us spread this message. But we have more to come on the public engagement. We're going to develop a steering committee, if you will, for this to help us get the word out to where we need to, but there's more coming. I would be talking more to our city council about the upcoming pieces of this, including that pilot project that I talked about, so we'll be able to get word out that way. But we're wrapping up some details now on the things that we can do to make sure that we're getting the word out, because you're correct. And we still get some concerns about the whole notion of direct potable reuse, and that's understandable. Pilot project, I think, is going to really provide us an opportunity to let people see what this is all about and how it can work.
Thank you.
Representative Stockdale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This probably comes from watching too much of that series Landman, but I've noticed when we drive by Wichita, there's the pump jacks on the east side of the road and so on for the oil production. And then we hear about fracking south of Wichita. Does that ever have any impact on the groundwater, either one of those processes?
If it does, I'm not aware that it does. Through the course of the drought that I talked about, and we're fortunate that the Equus beds is more naturally recharging. If you obviously all know about the Ogallala and the concerns in western Kansas. With the Little Ark River, actually with the Equus beds split being between the Little Ark and the Big Ark River, we're very fortunate that we get with the geology there that's more naturally recharging. Our recharge efforts have added to that. But through the course of our drought, we never saw the aquifer drop below 92%, which I thought was pretty remarkable considering where we were at and the impact it had on our surface water supply. So to your point, I can't say that we've directly investigated that, but if it does have an impact, we're not seeing it.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Blex.
Thank you for your report. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really believe that the city of Wichita has been a shining light and example in this innovative technique. And I had the opportunity to work on cost share way back when with the RAPS program. And a lot of people in this committee may not understand that the city of Wichita for a long time has put a lot of dollars into cost share projects that went to landowners up above Cheney Reservoir for the benefit of their water. So they've been an example that has showed the importance of water, which was the whole purpose of this committee, is to maintain a good, stable, high-quality water source in quantity and quality. And so I think the city has done a really great job because they put money when a lot of committees or cities would not. And that's been to me, a good example to other committees and cities that would be able to fund water. And Caney is in my district, and we all know what it went through. And you find out quickly, no matter how big or how small you are, the importance of water. So, I think this is a great project. It looks like you've done a fantastic job of the PR process of several of us in this room grew up drinking out of a garden hose and other places we probably shouldn't have and shouldn't be living as long as we did. But in the urban environment, there's this perception that becomes truth that they don't understand that everybody's downstream. So I thank you for what you're doing and the innovative process. I think it shows a good example and a leading effect for the whole state of Kansas. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this presentation. Where you receive a significant portion of your water from the Cheney Reservoir, and across the state, blue-green algae has become an increasing problem in our reservoirs. Have you had any problems with that in your water coming out of Cheney Reservoir? And do you anticipate you'll see that going forward?
Historically, we have not. Even when we were at the lower levels, there's still considerable depth within Cheney, even at that point, just because of the way it was developed and built for conservation pool and to keep in there for emergency storage. We have not seen that issue. There are some things that we do with ozone treatment when we come out of the reservoir that helps with taste and odor and certain things like algal blooms too. So we've been successful in not having that an issue to deal with.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically a comment, and then if Gary wants to add to it, or he certainly can, but I like the intent of this bill, being a local government proponent as I am, because I think, Gary, a couple of different times you used the phrase, another tool in the toolbox. And I think having a tool in the toolbox, not specific to one particular entity, is the right thing to do. And it's a permissive thing where it's not a mandatory thing. So I'm just saying I like what I'm reading here with regard to this proposed legislation. Thank you.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick question unrelated to reuse. But I was wondering, we've talked to like the GMDs and DWR a little bit about it, but I was wondering how the city was thinking about the Burton chloride plume. I'm sure it's on your radar. Is that something, you know, you see needing to be addressed in the immediate future? As a state partner, we've advocated in the past for remediation funding, things like that. I'm just curious how you're thinking about it and how the state can help.
We actually have your timing is good with that question. I have a meeting this afternoon with some folks sitting right behind me.
Great.
To talk about that. We've been discussing that for some time now. It has been one of the priorities of the Kansas Water Authority and the Kansas Water Office, looking at contamination issues across the state. It's necessary for the city of Wichita to be part of that discussion. As the chloride plume continues to migrate south-southeast, it is finding its way into our well field. It doesn't necessarily create a significant challenge for us from a treatment process. It does change what we do. It will change it could potentially change our water quality, but we want to be good partners. I mentioned that I sit on the board of GMD2, which is very important, I think, for what I do with the city of Wichita and our relationship and to be able to work through these things. So I've had a lot of discussions with the GMD2 board about that and the city's interest in being a part of that. We're currently looking at, one time we had looked at extending our well field to the north and trying to intercept some of the contaminated water sooner. Now we're trying to look from a cost-saving perspective to use existing infrastructure, potentially maybe converting some of our injection wells to extraction also, and see if we can start making a difference with the infrastructure that we have now and how that impacts our treatment process. So we are working on that. We're in the middle of that. There is within the proposed, in the budget discussions from the Water Office, there is some funding in there for that, but we're trying to find a way to do this maybe without impacting the budget much. But it's very, very front and center for us. Got a meeting this afternoon to talk about it more.
Awesome. I was also curious, talking about indirect potable reuse, I was just wondering, is that a potential use for indirect potable reuse to dilute the chloride plume? I don't know if that's possible or feasible.
I think it is. We've talked about that. That was part of the initial discussions even before I got involved in this, was to look at some way to mix with what's there, put it back into to the aquifer. We're at a point, again, we're fortunate with how our aquifer behaves. We're actually looking at building some recharge basins now to start getting water to those harder to reach places. We don't have a lot of capacity. But we definitely have looked at the notion of blending and mixing so we can help accommodate that water quality. But either way, there's going to be more to come. We're looking at some water quality parameters now and some modeling to see what the best approach is. But we're going to keep looking forward and see where we can get on that.
Lots of exciting updates and opportunities. So thank you for sharing with us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I was just curious. I've been told that in other parts of our United States, this reuse to total potable water has been done for years and years. Southern California, San Diego. Do you have just kind of a historical perspective on that?
Sure. So let's start with the direct potable reuse side. There's only one active direct potable reuse system in place in Big Spring, Texas. And that's been in place for some time. El Paso broke ground last year on a pure water facility for direct potable reuse. There are many states that are looking at projects moving forward, but indirect, for the states who have regulations in place, Texas, Colorado, Florida, New Mexico is working on it, Arizona's put it in place, but California in particular, and I spent some time out there and got to see what they were doing. California has had issues for so many years with the cost of conveyance. They get water from the Colorado River. They get it from snow melt in the mountains in the northern part of the state, from the aqueducts. And so what they're looking to do now and have started doing, they traditionally will treat their wastewater and send it out to the ocean. They're capturing that now, and it's expensive for them. But they're sending that water basically back upstream to augment where their water supplies because it's so costly for conveyance. Colorado River doesn't have the water supply that it used to at one time coming to California. I did hear the other day that California is in the best place that it's been for water supply in years. They've been fortunate to get some rain and timing of events, but they're moving forward on so many facilities. We toured probably a half a dozen reuse facilities just in the San Diego and Los Angeles County area while we were there. A lot of it is for augmentation, for aquifers. Again, for us, particular, we don't have a lot of room for storage in our aquifer to even consider that. And although it would be nice to send water from our wastewater treatment plant to Cheney Reservoir, again, that is a long ways to get there. It's only practical when the reservoir is down, so direct potable reuse becomes probably more practical for us. But indirect is happening a lot in a lot of areas already, and we can certainly take from them things that we can look at. We are still looking at the idea of more industrial reuse, just like we have a Spirit now. We've been working through that with CDM on what that looks like for industries within Wichita. And I mentioned before, we work with the Greater Wichita Partnership for businesses to come to our region that might be high water users. My first question to them is, can you put them close to our wastewater treatment facilities so that we could better facilitate this whole notion of industrial reuse? So we're trying to bring all of that together. It's not always the best places for people to be, but we're continuing those conversations. But we're again, CDM has got a lot of experience across the country, so it's important that we have them on board. We've been able to talk to other states, other communities to see what they're doing, and we're going to take all that knowledge that we can for what we're going to do with our plan.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it. I'm just sitting here looking around the committee. Representative Featherston, were you on the water committee 6 years ago? Okay, I'm guessing Brett, Joe, Doug, and Adam were around here about 6 years ago.
How could you forget?
I'm sorry, but I'm impressed, and this is my observation, that the things that you guys did 6 years ago, and the further things that this committee's done, I'm seeing cooperation between the city of Wichita and GMD2. Back in those days, there was a little bit of friction at times, but I think everybody's working together far better than we did in the past. I think the issue of water's been elevated tremendously, and it needed to be due to the importance that it has with our economy and our lives. So I think you guys have been around for quite a while for your participation in that. Thank you. We do still intend to meet on Tuesday. I don't have a full set agenda for that day. A week from today, we will hear one bill, 24. We'll take testimony from the public that day. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.